Hi everyone. Tonight we settle into a small cabin buried deep under snowdrifts. The roof sags beneath the frozen weight. Outside, the wind whistles across the empty plains. You step in and a cold gust greets you, the kind that steals your breath before you can even close the rough-hewn door. Beyond the walls, the night presses in, and warmth feels like a fragile lifeline. For frontier families, discomfort wasn't just a passing concern, it was survival. One bitter night could change everything. Before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy these stories. While you're at it, leave a note in the comments with your location and local time. Now, dim the lights. You crouch in the cabin, hearing snow crunch faintly beneath your boots. The scent of pine logs lingers where someone chopped firewood earlier. Shadows stretch across the rough timber walls. Families back then had no central heating, no humming radiators, only stone hearths, smoky chimneys, and the constant hope that embers would last until morning. You press your palms together and exhale, imagining the sting of frost deep in your chest, the ache of breathing while icicles cling to window panes. Pioneers in North America regularly endured nights far below freezing, yet their hastily built log or sod cabins were never sealed tight. No insulation, no glass, just gaps that let in drafts sharp enough to cut. Quilts, blankets, and sheer stubbornness were all that stood between them and frostbite. Historians still debate whether they ever slept comfortably, or whether nights were spent half awake, shivering, turning like rotisserie chickens to keep each side from freezing. You glance toward a corner where a straw mattress rests. No plush bedding, just dried grasses on wooden boards, sometimes stuffed into a ticking sack. The faint rustle might hide mice, another unwelcome roommate. Yet, against the relentless cold, even this scratchy bedding felt like a small blessing. Families layered blankets, feathered quilts if they were lucky, even animal hides, piling them heavy enough to pin themselves down. Here's an odd historical detail. Archaeologists found that settlers sometimes mixed cow dung with clay to plaster cabin walls. Not glamorous by modern standards, but this crust sealed cracks and blocked the wind. You can almost smell it. Earthy, acrid, a strange comfort when survival came first. As your gaze drifts to the hearth, a faint glow of embers pulses, casting warm red veins across the cabin floor. Imagine lying close, cheek pressed to the stones, radiating heat. But danger lingered too. Sparks could leap onto bedding, smoke could fill the room, stinging eyes and coating lungs. Winter nights brought not just cold, but the constant gamble of fire. Outside, wolves yip faintly in the distance, their calls riding the icy wind. Inside, children whisper lullabies, voices thin with sleep and shivers. Adults pull them closer, everyone pressed shoulder to shoulder.
Step outside briefly in the darkness. Your boots crunch on the snow, almost glowing under moonlight. Stars scatter like frozen sparks across the sky. The cold air slices into your lungs, and for a moment you feel the fragile miracle of simply being warm enough to stand here. Then your teeth chatter and you rush back inside, slamming the door against the night. Frontier families followed this nightly rhythm, banking fires, piling bedding, huddling close. Parents listened for the silence that meant embers had died, then dragged themselves from bed to stir the hearth again, coaxing faint orange flames to life. Morning often came with frozen water pails, frost tracing delicate lace over window shutters, and children reluctant to leave their worn cocoon. As you lie back, letting the cabin shadows fold over you, you can almost feel what it was like to sleep through the coldest nights without freezing. It wasn't luxury, it was endurance, creativity, and togetherness woven into every weary breath. Building a winter shelter wasn't just carpentry. It was the line between living to see spring or slipping silently into the snow. Picture yourself standing in a clearing surrounded by towering pines, breath hanging like a ghost. All you have is an axe, rough hands, and maybe a neighbor or two to help. How do you build a home that won't betray you when the blizzard rattles the door? Log cabins became the quintessential frontier survival structure in early America. Settlers felled trees, trimmed branches, and dragged heavy logs into place, stacking them roughly. The cracks were stuffed with moss, clay, mud, even animal hair, a process called chinking. Without it, icy drafts would whistle through, turning the cabin into a frozen wind tunnel. Some settlers used rags soaked in bacon grease as a sealant for stubborn gaps. Strange as it sounds, the grease hardened, creating a surprisingly durable barrier against drafts. You can almost see a child watching adults hammering fatty cloth strips into walls, the faint smell of pork lingering through winter. Run your hand along the wall. The bark is rough, uneven, but solid. Each log bears the marks of sweat and urgency. Historians debate how effective these cabins really were, but they undeniably offered psychological comfort. Families could sit inside thinking, "We've built a roof between us and the storm." That hope alone felt warm. Roofs carried their own risk too. Shingles cut by hand were nailed in overlapping layers, sometimes weighted with stones or tied with rawhide. Heavy snow could make them groan or collapse entirely. Inside, the floor was often bare earth, tamped down with heavy stones, smoothed as best as possible. Some families laid boards if tools allowed. Straw, rushes, or dried leaves padded the floor beneath rugs. Every layer was a quiet defiance against the chill. Building a cabin could take weeks, even with help. Winter waited for no one. You can picture a family racing against the shortening autumn days, children gathering moss, mothers stirring stew over outdoor fires, fathers hauling logs until their shoulders ached. Step outside and the air stings your nostrils, the forest hushed except for the crack of splitting wood. Pine sap mixes with the earthy tang of fresh clay. No traffic hum, no street lights, just you, the cabin, and the encroaching certainty of winter. Oddly, some settlers lined cabin interiors with newspaper when they could spare it, not to read, but for insulation. Headlines, lost and found ads, and sermon notes became a patchwork shield against the wind. By candlelight, children sometimes traced the letters before sleep, turning the news into both decoration and protection. Early settlers borrowed ideas from indigenous neighbors, like packing snow against cabin bases to block drafts, though letters often downplayed such help. At night, once walls stood firm and the roof sealed overhead, the family gathered by the fire. The cabin's corners might still sigh with cold, but the logs stood as sentinels against the storm. Children giggled under quilts, while the father checked the chinking. Mothers set wool socks by the hearth. Every ordinary detail stitched together a tapestry of survival.
Imagine the first night in a brand new cabin. Weeks of work, endless worry, straw pallets tucked with quilts. The walls hold, the wind howls outside, yet no longer slices across their faces. A faint fire glows, casting soft shadows. For the first time, they can close their eyes without watching for snow piling on their blankets. The relief must have tasted sweeter than any luxury. Some frontier families painted their cabin interiors with milk and lime, partly to brighten, partly to discourage insects and rot. Candlelight bouncing off whitewashed logs transformed cramped cabins into small, glowing sanctuaries. But fragility remained. A single spark could undo months of labor, leaving only ashes. Families slept alert to the hearth's crackle, grateful yet wary. Survival was always a gamble. Still, lying on that rough mattress, The cabin's walls steady around you, there's peace. The logs are uneven, the air still sharp, the bedding thin, but without those walls, you wouldn't survive. The cabin isn't just wood and moss, it's hope, nailed together by calloused hands. That hope keeps you alive. Sleeping on packed earth may seem miserable today, but frontier families adapted. Even humble coverings, straw, rushes, worn textiles, made the difference between misery and tolerable rest. They tamped down the soil, watering and beating it firm until it felt almost like stone beneath their feet. It wasn't elegant, but it worked, taking the daily pounding of boots, livestock hooves, and children's feet. At night, the earth floor radiated cold like a stone slab, seeping through bedding unless cleverly insulated. One unusual practice stands out. Families spread fresh straw across the dirt floor, not only for cushioning, but also for insulation. Every week or two, it was replaced, mingling faintly with smoke and cooking scents. Imagine children tiptoeing across the room, the straw crunching softly underfoot in dim candlelight. Over time, the bedding wasn't just comfort, it became a primitive hygiene measure, soaking up spills and ash. Of course, mice and insects found it delightful too, darting beneath the layers like unwanted companions. Historians still debate how clean these makeshift floors truly remained. Some diaries describe weekly rituals of sweeping and refreshing the straw. Others hint at long stretches of neglect when floors grew damp, dusty, or teeming with tiny scuttling shapes. Which was more typical? Likely it varied from cabin to cabin, shaped by each family's energy and resources. Now picture the sleeping surface itself, sacks scuffed with straw or corn husks laid on the ground. Press your hand into it and feel the uneven crunch, the bits poking through, the give beneath your fingers. Over time, husks broke down into dust and sacks needed refilling. Not a luxury mattress, but better than lying on frozen soil. Sheep's wool, reeds from marshes, or whatever the landscape offered often supplemented the bedding. The sensory details were vivid, drifting off to sleep with the scent of dry grass in your nose, straw shifting softly as your family moved beside you, the faint squeak of mice, the hiss of wind pressing against the walls, all reminders of your closeness to the raw earth. Some settlers even rubbed oil or animal fat into the packed floor, a trick borrowed from European peasant homes. This made the surface smoother and slightly shiny, resisting dust. Children sometimes slid toy pebbles across it, pretending it was ice. Candlelight reflected off the subtle sheen, making the one-room dwelling feel a touch more civilized amid the wilderness. Bedding arrangements grew inventive. Families slept in layers, straw sacks on the floor, then a quilt, everyone piled together under heavy blankets. Bed frames, when present, were usually reserved for parents, while children lay nearby straw pallets. Closeness wasn't just emotional, it was thermal engineering. More bodies meant more heat, increasing chances of waking alive. Debates persist. Did huddling together over straw floors truly save lives? Many historians believe yes. Body heat and layers kept families safe. Others argue dampness and illness might have offset the benefits. Frontier memoirs tell both sides, nights of snug security and nights of coughing children, aching bones, and relentless chill. Yet ingenuity never stopped. As nails or planks became available, floors improved. Split logs laid flat, punch-on floors raised above earth, rough but better. Clay packed and smoothed with water and ashes was another method. Over time, planks, rugs, and even feather beds appeared. Step by step, comfort grew, gradually moving away from raw survival. Still, intimacy remained. Lying beside family on straw pallets, feeling the warmth of a shoulder, listening to children's slow breathing, Smelling earth, wood smoke, and faint wool, this was life. Outside, snow blanketed the world. Inside, layers of bedding and straw provided enough buffer. Sleep came not from comfort, but from exhaustion and trust in fragile rituals refined through generations. Imagine the morning after. Dawn creeping through shutter cracks, frost outlining bedding where breath had condensed. Straw scattered the floor as children clambered out, parents shaking and airing sacks, checking for dampness. These daily routines, cleaning, refilling, spreading straw, became survival, just as important as chopping wood or baking bread. Later generations remembered the sound of rustling straw as a lullaby, a memory of endurance. Picture yourself lying again on that layered straw bed, floor hard but softened by ingenuity, cabin groaning gently around you. You're not comfortable, but you're alive, and that is victory. Tomorrow the straw will be replaced, the floor smoothed, preparing for another night. Tonight you let the earthy scent and faint crackle carry you toward dreams. The cabin walls stand firm in your imagination, earth floor layered with straw and husks. Yet above all, the fire ruled the night. Its faint glow paints long orange streaks across rough logs, warmth spreading like an invisible blanket. Without it, the night was unlivable. Historians agree the hearth was the center of frontier life, not just for cooking, but as a defense against freezing death. Each evening, fires were banked to smolder until dawn. If they went out, someone had to rise, coax a spark back, and hope the wood would catch. Failure meant frozen water pails, frost-coated walls, breath crystallizing midair. Children often took fire watch shifts, small bodies wrapped in quilts, poking embers with sticks as wind screamed outside. Parents took turns in homes without older children, dozing in shifts so the hearth wouldn't betray them. Families experimented, stacking rocks to retain heat, choosing oak or hickory to burn longer, or burning dried dung when desperate. Every tactic balanced warmth against smoke, stinging eyes and coughing throats. Listen, the fire crackles, heat pulses on your cheeks, smoke clinging to your hair, sparks jumping like little warnings. Children's coughs mingle with the warmth surrounding them. Some families raked ashes into a mound, burying glowing coals to revive in the morning. Others heated stones or bricks, wrapped them in cloth, and slipped them between quilts. Debate continues. Did early chimneys help or hinder survival? Poorly built stone chimneys leaked heat, yet without them, smoke might have suffocated the family. Survival meant balancing risk and reward, warmth and danger. Outside, snow muffles the world. Inside, every sound is magnified. Poker scraping stone, quilts whispering, slow breathing of clustered sleepers. The hearth isn't just heat, it's life itself. Some settlers arranged beds in a circle around the fireplace, children closest, adults behind, grandparents furthest, protecting the most vulnerable. It is haunting and beautiful, a wheel of humanity around the fire.
Morning revealed the fire's story. Glowing embers under ash meant gratitude. A dead hearth meant striking flint and seeking coal from neighbors, pride bent under the weight of survival. Yet comfort existed. The fire became companion, its rhythm part of family memory. Children fell asleep to the crackle as lullaby. Parents' faces glowed amber. Fires could also terrify, destroying cabins and forcing families into snow with nothing but clothes on their backs. Tonight, imagine closing your eyes inside this cabin. You feel the fire's pulse, glow on your cheeks, warmth across your toes, shadows flickering. Embers may fade before dawn, but for now, the fire cradles you, a fragile guardian, burning slowly, just enough to carry you through the long winter night. Yet in frontier homes, warmth rarely came from fire alone. Survival depended on ingenuity, layering, and the careful rituals that transformed a cold cabin into life itself. Warmth on the frontier depended not just on fire, but on the closeness of human bodies, the pooling of breath, the shared cocoon of quilts, the steady heat radiating from skin. Nighttime together wasn't only about affection, it was necessity. Surviving letters and journals revealed that many households shared a single bed, or at least a single sleeping space. Parents, children, sometimes visiting relatives or neighbors crowded under one heavy pile of blankets. It was practical. The more bodies pressed together, the less each person had to fight the cold alone. Imagine lying shoulder to shoulder with a sibling, the edge of a quilt tugged here and there by restless feet. Comfort wasn't the priority, survival was. Frontier accounts describe an unusual head-to-toe arrangement, one person's feet pressed against the next person's head. Awkward, yes, but it minimized space and maximized warmth, transforming a bed into a carefully choreographed puzzle of limbs and blankets. Children remembered this with humor and resentment alike, waking to icy toes against cheeks. Scholars still debate how culturally normal such closeness felt. Some argue that in communities used to large extended families and shared labor, it was natural. Others suggest that as soon as resources allowed, households sought privacy and separate quarters. Yet necessity often outweighed preference. The air inside a shared quilt canopy was warmer, mingling smells of wool, straw, and breath. Quilts pressed down heavily, cocooning bodies, muffling the wind clawing at shutters outside. Inside, the nest of bodies felt like a single organism, every heartbeat contributing to fragile warmth. Sometimes, beds included not just family, but travelers or neighbors, squeezed under quilts to survive storms. Awkward politeness filled the first minutes, before cold and fatigue erased boundaries. Children whispered, invented games, sang snatches of songs, or listened to parents' tales of warmer lands. Shared warmth extended beyond quilts to words, a nightly ritual woven into survival. How common was multi-family or multi-person sleeping? Diaries vary. Northern households in harsher climates leaned toward communal beds, while milder regions sometimes afforded space. Survival strategies bent to climate, resources, and culture. Picture the quilt itself, heavy, patchworked, stitched from scraps of dresses, coats, or flour sacks. If available, feathers puffed its interior, but often it was simply layers of fabric sewn tight. Each uneven stitch marked care. These blankets weren't bought. They were tools forged by necessity. Some Scandinavian immigrants hung fur pelts over quilts, creating a final shield against icy air. Deer hides, bear skins, or sheep fleeces made makeshift duvets. The smell of animal lingered, mingling with smoke and sweat, yet warmth was undeniable. Children sometimes fought over which fur was softer or smelled less pungent. The intimacy of these arrangements carried emotional weight. Pressed together, they found reassurance, even as wind howled and snow drifted high. Memoirs recall these nights with nostalgia, safety and proximity, or relief, longing for independence. Morning brought its own challenge. Fire reduced to ash, quilts damp from breath, limbs stiff, air outside sharp and merciless. Socks, wool caps, and quick breath became essential, yet gratitude lingered beneath discomfort. You were alive, as were those you shared the bed with. The line between affection and strategy blurred. Each touch, whispered word under heavy quilts, every gesture was a calculated act of endurance woven seamlessly into family life. The quilts themselves carried stories, stitched from scraps of clothing, reused tirelessly. Feather beds insulated against freezing windows, patchwork quilts told the family's history. One daughter recognized her mother's faded dress sewn into a patch near her face, a comforting memory of intimacy. Quilts could even be used for barter, a painful choice when survival demanded trade. Scents of smoke, wool, and musty down became inseparable from winter nights, the fragrance of survival itself. Making quilts shaped community life. Quilting bees, gatherings where women stitched together patchwork, were social as well as practical, filled with stories, songs, laughter, and steaming mugs of cider. Children ran underfoot as adults labored over fabric, creating patterns that would soon cover snowbound beds. Each quilt carried voices and effort, a communal shield against isolation. Not every quilt was art. Many were coarse, patched repeatedly, layered to protect against frost. Yet even humble coverings marked the difference between enduring the night and succumbing to the cold. Return now to your imagined bed. The quilt drapes heavily, carrying stories, scents, symbols stitched into corners. Labor, memory, and countless nights endured reside in its fibers. Not luxurious, but in the frozen darkness, it is life itself. The quilt's weight presses the cold away, guiding your mind softly towards sleep. Yet even the best quilts could be challenged by drafts slipping through walls or windows. On the frontier, fighting cold was a nightly battle, a test of ingenuity, endurance, and shared warmth. Frontier families waged nightly battles against invisible intruders, the cold itself. Windows and doors were the weak points. Glass panes were rare luxuries. Most settlers relied on oiled paper stretched across wooden frames or rough plank shutters. These faint coverings let in some daylight, but did little against the midnight chill. Imagine a sheet of paper stiffened with grease, glowing faintly in moonlight but flapping in the wind when storms rolled through. Improvisation was key. Rags, moss, even old corn cobs stuffed into gaps around shutters blocked drafts. Children helped, jamming bits of cloth while parents inspected seams. Not elegant, but effective. Every scrap meant fewer icy fingers creeping into the room. Historians debate the efficiency of these measures. Some suggest that sealing cabins too tightly caused condensation, dampening bedding and chilling sleepers. Others argue that without such barriers, the wind would have swept through entirely, leaving families no chance at rest. Survival required compromise. Tighten too much, risk dampness. Leave gaps, risk frostbite. Feel it. A cold draft brushes your cheek under the quilts, faint enough to seem a dream. You shift closer to the wall, only to discover that the log beside you is cold as stone. Every creak of the shutter reminds you how fragile the barrier is between inside and out. Some Appalachian families hung heavy rugs or blankets over doors at night, like curtains in a theater, dropping to trap precious warmth. Damp wool smells heavy, comforting, and children sometimes played hide-and-seek behind them in the dim candlelight. Slowly, the cabin becomes a fortress, not against wolves or raiders, but against winter itself.
Settlers borrowed and improvised. European peasants used shutters and cloth coverings. English cottages layered curtains. On the frontier, immigrant habits merged with improvisation, creating practical solutions. Anything that plugged a hole kept a family alive. The atmosphere of these sealed cabins was unique. Oiled paper glowed amber from within, wool rugs muffled noise, and air thickened with breath and smoke. Imagine lying here, the world reduced to flickering shadows, ears filled only with fire crackling and steady breathing. Ingenuity extended further. Barrels of water against walls absorbed cold. Firewood stacked along cracks turned supplies into insulation. Diaries recount snow drifting through keyholes or sifting between logs, dusting blankets like powdered sugar. Brushing frost from hair, shaking snow from a quilt, it was a constant test. Children learned early, turning the chore of sealing drafts into a game, proud when the icy sting vanished. Historians debate whether frontier homes were truly livable in winter or if families endured near constant shivering. What is certain, sealing windows and doors was no optional task. It was survival itself. Now imagine another form of warmth stirring in the cabin. Living, breathing, occasionally snoring. Animals joined the nightly circle. Dogs curled at children's feet, cats sought straw pallets, even livestock sometimes came indoors.
Farm journals recall household dogs acting as living blankets, their fur radiating heat. Cats purred like small furnaces. Some families coaxed cows into the cabin on the harshest nights. Space cramped, smells mingled, yet the benefit outweighed the inconvenience. We shared the winter with our Bessie, a pioneer girl wrote, and never were the warmer for it. Scholars remain divided. Hygiene concerns versus necessity. Disease, parasites, and filth balanced against survival. Records may be sparse, not for rarity, but for embarrassment. Who admitted sleeping nose to tail with a pig to avoid frostbite? Close your eyes and feel it. Under a heavy quilt, a dog shifts at your feet, its warmth seeping through layers. A cat purrs against the silence. And in the far corner, a goat rustles in its pen, hay mixing with smoke. The room is alive, a chorus of beings resisting winter together. Scandinavian immigrants sometimes built animal corners inside cabins, small enclosures for sheep or goats, adding warmth to ease family sleep. Shared space blurred the lines between human home and barn. Smoke-filled rooms mingled with odors, but the psychological reassurance was profound. A dog against your legs, a cow in the corner, a cat curled nearby, each living breath a guardian against the night. Quaint anecdotes preserve this intimacy. A boy pressed between the family dog and his sister, kittens mistaken for hot stones beneath quilts. Scholars debate how widespread these arrangements were. European traditions of human-animal closeness, frontier improvisation, or a mix, but each household adapted as temperatures plunged. And dawn arrived. Dogs stretched, scattering straw, cats leapt toward the door, and the cow steamed impatiently as it was moved back to the barn. The air was heavy, yet relief permeated the room. Surviving the night was a ritual of endurance. The phrase, three-dog night, captures this reality. The coldest evenings judged by how many dogs were needed to survive. Tonight, imagine the press of fur, the purrs, the soft shuffle of hooves. You are part of a small community, human and animal, each sharing warmth to endure. Frontier families also relied on fabric barriers, curtains, canopies, hangings, as ingenious shields. Travelers' accounts describe beds tucked against walls, hidden beneath cloths or old quilts, not for fashion, but physics, capturing warm air, reducing drafts. Visualize a square of faded fabric drooping from wooden rods, fluttering with each breath, cocooning sleepers against icy gloom. In New England, families stretched patchwork quilts on hoops above beds, lowering them like tents. Children adored these playhouses, though survival, not play, dictated their use. Morning brought warm air spilling from the canopy, leaving everyone reluctant to leave their little cave. Scholars still debate how widespread such bed curtains were used, especially in poorer households. Wealthier families could afford proper canopy frames, heavy drapes woven for warmth and privacy. But frontier settlers improvised. Flour sacks, patched sheets, even animal hides, leaving fewer traces in the records. Historians debate how common these makeshift hangings were. Step closer into this scene. Imagine a curtain drawn across your bed, shutting out the flicker of the fire. Instantly, the space feels warmer, quieter, intimate. Your breath fills the small enclosure, frosting lightly against the fabric walls. Outside, the creak of rafters and shuffle of feet are muffled. Inside, you are wrapped in a capsule of safety. In some immigrant communities, curtains were embroidered with protective symbols, stars, knots, crosses, meant to ward off evil spirits prowling the night. Whether these charms offered spiritual comfort or merely psychological warmth hardly mattered. Children traced the stitched shapes, feeling defended in body and spirit. Experts debate risks, too. Thick curtains in smoky cabins could reduce ventilation, yet most cabins had enough cracks that suffocation was rarely a concern. The truth, however, was always dependent on circumstance. What saved one family might leave another coughing through the night. Focus on the sensory layers. Fabric smells faintly of soap or damp wool, brushing your cheek, whispering softly with each movement. Light filters unevenly, casting ghostly patches across your quilt. Inside, warmth. Outside, cold, biting at the curtain's edge. That small partition is the border between discomfort and survival. Diaries recall the emotional comfort these hangings offered. One woman remembered sleeping in a separate world, the curtain transforming a crowded one-room cabin into a private chamber. For children, the illusion of a secret hideout added wonder to harsh conditions. Some families used the canopy frames to dry clothes, hanging damp socks or mittens above the bed so trapped warmth could hasten drying. Waking beneath steaming garments may not sound pleasant, but in a snowbound world, it was practical. You can almost smell wet wool mingling with smoke and breath. Scholars debate origins, medieval European imports, or inventions born of necessity. Either way, the fabric shielded countless sleepers from the cruel night air. Morning brought its own rituals, folding frosty curtains, restoring the cabin to shared reality. But for those hours of darkness, the curtain created a fragile paradise, a thin cloth separating human warmth from the wilderness. Sleepwear was another weapon against winter. Modern pajamas were unknown. On the frontier, nightly clothing was armor. Household records and letters reveal that settlers rarely undressed. Wool shirts, thick stockings, long undergarments, knitted caps. These were layered deliberately. Nightgowns existed, but only if fabric allowed. Caps kept heads from losing heat, often tied under the chin on children, giving them a comical yet crucial look. Without these layers, ears and noses would freeze. Some scholars caution that too many layers risk dampness. Others insist that every scrap of wool or linen was essential. Diaries hint at both, heavy layering or a balance between warmth and ventilation.
Now feel it. You climb beneath quilts weighted with history. Wool stockings scratch your calves. A coarse linen shirt clings to your chest. A cap hugs your head, fabric rustling with every breath. Inside the cap, warmth collects, dampening slightly with your exhalations. Naked skin against icy air would be unthinkable. Scandinavian settlers swaddled children in layers of sheepskin or fur. German families prized thick wool undergarments. English families relied on long shirts, doubling day wear and night wear. Each tradition bent toward the same goal: conserve warmth. Improvisation mattered too. Old sacks became shirts, scraps of fur stitched into socks, newspapers wrapped around legs. One farmer's wife recalled using cabbage leaves under stockings to prevent frostbite. Desperate but clever. Children sometimes wore oversized mittens to bed, only to find them stiff with frost by morning. Scholars debate hygiene under these layers. Washing was rare. Wool retained odor. Linen shirts saw little soap during long winters. Yet survival mattered more than scent. Imagine it, wool stiffened by dampness, a quilt heavy above, each layer a shield against the wind. Some children were packed so tightly in wool and linen that movement became difficult. Parents laughed but knew each layer increased the chance of waking with rosy cheeks instead of blue lips. Sleepwear also carried modesty in households where everyone slept side by side, though necessity often dictated function over fashion. Improvised garments, scraps, and fur patches were practical solutions. And then there were bed warmers, another ingenious frontier tool. Stones, bricks, or pieces of iron, heated in the fire, wrapped in cloth, tucked beneath quilts. Diaries and letters make it clear these glowing bundles were life-saving. Some households had metal pans to slide coals across the mattress. Others relied on bricks or river stones warmed by the fire. The objects radiated heat for hours, softening the icy air. One settler recalled baked potatoes wrapped in cloth, held like dolls to warm small hands. By morning, cold, but edible, blending food and survival. Researchers debate prevalence, fuel-heavy households versus universal access to stones and a hearth. Yet accounts of hot bricks and bed warmers appear across regions, suggesting a survival tactic as old as winter itself. Imagine it. A brick wrapped in cloth is slid beneath your quilt. At first, it's intense, but slowly the warmth spreads through bedding, seeping into bones, warding off frozen toes. Scorched cloth mingles faintly with wood smoke, a scent tied to comfort, survival, and ingenuity. The warmth of a hot stone was sharp but oddly comforting, a small luxury in a world of harsh deprivation. Among Dutch immigrants, a common practice involved filling earthenware jugs with hot water, corking them tightly and slipping them beneath quilts. These jugs radiated heat for hours and could be reheated each evening. Some families even carried them into sleighs or wagons, softening the sting of winter travel. Imagine the clink of pottery against wooden bed frames, the steam rising as corks hissed loose in the morning. Historians debate the safety of such practices. Hot coals and pans posed fire risks, especially in straw-stuffed cabins. Stories survive of bedding igniting, flames racing across quilts before being beaten out in panic. Others insist careful wrapping and experience kept accidents rare. Perhaps reality lay in between. Families balance the gamble of fire against the certainty of frost. Picture the evening rituals. A child crouches by the hearth, poking a stone deeper into glowing coals. A mother checks the cloth wrapping, frowning at a singed edge. The father lifts the warm stone with tongs, sliding it into the bed. The family exhales in unison as the heat spreads through the quilts. Fire had to be coaxed just right, the heat captured at the precise moment, bedding adjusted to trap it all. These bed warmers left powerful sensory memories. A pioneer recalled the smell of wool smoldering where a stone pressed too close. Another wrote that she could always tell when a stone cooled because her dreams shifted from soft to restless, and she awoke pulling quilts tighter. When stones weren't available, families improvised. Iron tools, kettles of hot water, even sacks of heated sand. Some settlers borrowed native techniques, burying heated earth beneath bedding, though this was rarer in cabins. Children treasured these warm bundles like companions, sometimes naming their bricks, carrying them from hearth to bed. By morning, the stones lay cold, but at night they seemed magical. Step beneath the imagined quilt. Feel warmth radiating from a stone pulled fresh from the hearth. Let it sink into your body, easing the sting of cold biting at nose and ears. Outside, snow heaps against the walls, wind prowls like a hungry animal. Inside, the stone radiates borrowed heat, small but steady, carrying you just toward dawn. Yet all this ingenuity depended on one foundation: wood. Firewood was the currency of survival. Every ember, every bed warmer, every simmering pot relied on an unbroken supply of logs. Frontier families spent entire seasons cutting, splitting, and hauling, sometimes 10 to 15 cords for a single harsh winter. Imagine the mountain of labor, every piece carved by human muscle. Vermont diaries describe wood bees, communal gatherings to help neighbors catch up. Axes rang through forests, women served hot cider, children gathered kindling. By dusk, a yard once bare brimmed with stacked cords, laughter echoing alongside aching muscles. Wood scarcity varied. Forested regions seemed endless. Prairie settlements struggled, hauling logs from afar, or burning roots in dried buffalo dung. Letters from Kansas and Nebraska complain of treeless winters, while Maine diaries recount excess, burning wood extravagantly. Survival strategies shifted with the landscape. Hear the sound of axes biting frozen trunks, smell the resin of pine and earthy oak, feel splinters prick your palms, your breath clouding as you heave another log. Each strike of the axe was insurance against the night. Some Appalachian families build wood collars around stumps, stacking split logs in circular piles to season evenly. Children played atop them, adults measured carefully. Shortfalls weren't minor inconveniences, they were death sentences. Scholars debate children's roles. Some argue boys as young as 6 help with kindling, others suggest lighter chores. The line between work and survival was blurred. At dusk, families returned outside after chores, axes swinging by lantern light. Coal bit fingers, but the rhythm of chopping became music. Inside, fires popped as fresh logs were stacked, resin mingling with smoke. Tomorrow, the cycle would begin again. Some communities imbued cutting wood with ritual. Scandinavian families offered prayers with the first log. New England neighbors judged a man's diligence by the straightness of his stacks. Imagine a father in February measuring his dwindling woodpile, anxiety gnawing as snow falls. Letters describe men trudging miles to borrow logs, sleds groaning under the load. Relief at stacked wood was palpable, a visible wall against the icy wilderness. Evening fires carried sensory memory. Cheeks flushed from heat, feet thawing after chores, children poking embers, women sewing, men sharpening axes. Outside, wind keened. Inside, crackling wood became a lullaby of survival.
Decisions over wood, green or dried, hickory or pine, refined by trial, error, sometimes tragedy, shaped household philosophy. Smoke blackened ceilings, coughs told one story, warm beds and glowing embers told the rest. One boy recalled falling asleep to the sound of his father splitting logs, the axe marking time like a clock. Each log was more than fuel, it was reassurance of another dawn. When families retreated indoors, shutters sealed, fire dimming, the night demanded another kind of survival, light. Not bulbs, but fragile candles, lanterns, sparks. Light guided midnight steps, comforted fearful children, allowed embers to be stirred safely. Candles, tallow, beeswax, or pressed grease, were precious, trimmed carefully, wax recycled. Pine knots flared brightly, propped in iron holders, casting flickering gold and shadows across the cabin. Children marveled at these torches, seeing magic in smoke and sparks. Records show frontier families improvised constantly. Whale oil, kerosene, candles, lamps, whatever was at hand. A child might be the assigned light keeper, carrying a candle or lantern on late-night tasks, proud of responsibility, learning early the balance between safety and necessity. Too little light risked injury. Too much wasted precious fuel. The flickering rhythm of illumination shaped the pulse of frontier nights. Brief bursts of glow, followed by long stretches of darkness. Each shadow a reminder of life carefully preserved. Families huddled under quilts, speaking softly until sleep overcame them, stretching the darkness into a living, breathing presence. Picture a midnight moment. The father rises to tend the fire. He slides from beneath quilts, the cold hitting like a slap. A lantern swings in his hand, glass smudged with soot, flame guttering as he crosses the cabin. Each step clicks against the floor. The faint light rouses a child, who watches him move like a ghost through shadows. Kneeling by the hearth, he pokes at embers until they flare, then returns to bed, leaving darkness to reclaim the room. Frontier women sometimes used glowing coals as light, scooping them onto iron plates to brighten the workspace, enough to thread a needle or mend a tear. It filled the cabin with smoky tang. Modern eyes see risk. For them, it was just another tool. Historians debate whether frontier families feared darkness more than urban dwellers. Isolation, wolves howling outside, and thin shutters certainly amplified tension. Yet frontier children grew accustomed to near total darkness, finding it no more alarming than daylight. Darkness shaped routines. Bedtime came early. Work ceased once candles were gone, and long hours stretched for sleep. Imagine the sensory tapestry of such nights. Ember glow and flickering candles illuminate rough-hewn walls. Wax drips, fat burns, eyes strain. Darkness presses into corners, leaving only the warmth of quilts and the fragile circle of firelight. Light was comfort as much as sight. A child drifting to sleep beneath a lantern felt safer, convinced the flame warded off danger. Parents whispered stories, half-illuminated faces glowing in firelight. Some communities made an evening ritual of extinguishing the flame together, marking a nightly surrender. Children remembering the whoosh of breath, the sudden plunge into black, the thickened silence. Feel the candle flicker at your bedside. Shadows ripple across walls. Tallow hisses faintly. Soon the flame dies, leaving darkness, but for these last moments, it cradles you in fragile glow, a reminder that even the smallest light carries you through the coldest night. Family sleep was rarely interrupted. Someone always rose to coax the fire from fading embers. Diaries show appointed duties: father, eldest child, sometimes mother, feeding the hearth like a living creature. A hearth gone cold meant frozen water buckets, frost inside the cabin, danger pressing in. An Ohio settler recalled his mother using a brass pot lid to smother embers, letting them glow until morning. She still rose to poke coals, children joking she tended a patient, fussing over her sleeping fire. Frontier households adapted differently, but someone always watched. Broken sleep shaped life, half aware of fire, dreams entwined with duty, jolted awake by collapsing wood. Fire tending became a badge of pride. Children competed to rise first, proving responsibility. Scholars debate health effects. Interrupted sleep may have weakened immune systems, but segmented sleep was common across pre-modern cultures. Step closer into the rhythm of midnight. You push free of quilts, breath puffing white, guided by ember glow. Kneeling, you prod logs. Sparks leap like startled fireflies. A sigh as a log slides into place, warmth blooming again. You return to bed, drowsiness mixing with satisfaction, having stolen a few hours from the cold. Some families banked coals under ashes, teaching children to tend fires as naturally as walking. Sometimes skill faltered, mornings came cold, flint struck sparks, a neighbor loaned embers. A child running through snow with glowing coals is a portrait of determination. Gendered division of labor remains unclear. Mothers often rose to tend hearths, while infants stirred. Fathers or elder sons sometimes took responsibility. What mattered was vigilance. Broken sleep carried psychological weight, half aware of fire, dreams entwined with duty, jolted awake by collapsing wood. Even chores became play. Children competed for the honor of waking the fire, their first taste of responsibility. Some researchers note fragmented nights weakened health. Others argue segmented sleep simply aligned with humanity's natural rhythms. Lean closer to the fire. Ash hisses, logs crack, smoke curls lazily. Fingers sting, soon warmed by glow. A cough, rustle of someone turning, then silence again. The room feels suspended between wakefulness and sleep, half shadow, half dream, entirely ruled by flame. Parents groggy, children yawning, yet pride in keeping the fire alive prevailed. Waking to glowing coals meant victory, warmth wrested from darkness. Nestled beneath heavy quilts, sleep is shared with duty, rising and resting in turns, guarding the fragile flame between family and deadly cold. In that watchfulness lies resilience, proof that even in broken slumber, life endured. The fire glows across the packed earth floor, Quilts rustle as slumber resumes. In this half-dark, half-warm hush, children whisper. Winter nights were more than battles against cold. They were stages for imagination. Stories, songs, and games filled the void, comforting young minds against icy drafts. Mothers hummed low, smoky voices weaving ballads from Scotland, hymns from New England, or improvised verses of daily chores. Songs steadied hearts, becoming tools against fear and cold. Children played shadow animals on walls by candlelight, fingers flickering as dogs, birds, or monsters, momentarily turning the draft-ridden cabin into a theater. Laughter softened the harshness. Some historians debate frequency. Perhaps moments of quiet were punctuated by bursts of games, chatter, or whispered jokes. Lie close to siblings, quilts pulled high. Candlelight flickers across rough walls. A brother chants counting rhymes in German and English, half-understood syllables trailing into snores. Language itself becomes a lullaby, stitching old worlds to new. Songs may have embedded moral tales or simply offered comfort. The uncertainty lingers like echoes long after the last note fades. Feel the physical sensations, cold toes nudging siblings, sneezes cracking the silence, breath clouds swirling above quilts. Laughter rises, and for brief moments the cabin feels less a prison of cold, more a shared stage of life. In Kentucky, the game of breath clouds returned night after night, a dark cabin alive with drifting puffs of air, children entranced by their own bodies producing something visible, almost magical. Scholars note that winter storytelling often carried warnings, tales of travelers frozen in snowdrifts or spirits prowling outside to teach children respect for the cold. Yet, in the dim firelight, these warnings softened into rituals of bonding. A child listening to a parent's hushed voice felt secure, even when danger lingered in the story. Picture the sensory arc. The fire pops, a dog sighs at the foot of the bed, and your father begins a tale in low, deliberate tones. Shadows stretch across rough walls as you clutch your quilt tighter, both afraid and thrilled, until drowsiness overtakes fear. By the story's end, eyelids droop and the winter night loses some of its bite. Decades later, adults recalled these winters with surprising fondness, not the cold, but laughter, songs, whispered stories, and shared warmth. Play and song reframed suffering, turning survival into memories of delight. Mothers knitted by firelight while children stumbled over school songs, laughing at mistakes. The cabin became a stage, quilts their costumes, the hearth their spotlight. Outside, the howling wind seemed to applaud their efforts. Even as the cold nipped, laughter faded into snores, songs dissolved into silence, and stories lingered like ghosts in the rafters. Winter nights weren't erased, but wrapped in a warmth beyond fire, carrying families into gentler sleep. Snow itself became an unlikely ally. Frontier families used it as insulation, banking drifts against cabin walls. Though icy to the touch, snow trapped air, creating a protective barrier like a quilt around the home, muting wind, muffling sound, and helping retain hearth warmth. Picture a cabin half buried in snow, windows peeking out like sleepy eyes under a thick white blanket. One Canadian settler wrote of shoveling snow to the eaves, calling it a cave of frost. But inside, the fire burned brighter, the air steadier. Modern ears find paradox here, but it worked. Debates linger. Were snowbanks intentional or natural byproducts of storms? Perhaps both. Step into the cabin. Sounds muted, even wolves howl from a distance. Blue light filters through oiled paper windows, tinted by snow pressed close. Inside, air is still, smoke lingers, The scent of wood mixes with melting snow, a fragrance both earthy and sharp. Families cut blocks of snow to build windbreaks around doors, children helping, sleds piled with icy bricks. Doors became fortresses. Some carved windows into snow walls, calling them winter castles, turning hardship into play. Scholars also explore indigenous influence. Native peoples had long mastered snow shelters, igloos, snow lodges, shaping structures to trap heat. Settlers observed, adapted, and sometimes borrowed these techniques quietly, blending them into log cabins. Raised sleeping platforms, fur layering, cattail stuffing in cracks, all borrowed wisdom. The fire pit glows steadily. Coarse guard hairs brush the chin beneath thick furs. The smell of resin, earth, and fur mingles with wood smoke. Outside, snow presses hard, but inside, ingenuity shields families. Children remembered the tactile comfort, sleeping inside walls padded like giant pillows, coiled under furs scented by forest and smoke. Practices blended, sometimes dismissed, sometimes cherished, shaping new survival traditions. Scholars debate. Did settlers truly embrace indigenous winter knowledge or merely adapt fragments? Some see log cabins as stubborn tradition, while others point to survival in Minnesota or Ontario as proof of adaptation. Either way, these nights tell a story of endurance and quiet cultural exchange. Children grew up in households mixing European lullabies with sleeping arrangements inspired by native practice. They whispered stories of wolves outside while breathing air softened by cattail and insulated by snow. They learned resilience in subtle ways, watching, borrowing, adapting. Every winter night became a lesson in survival, creativity, and the blending of worlds, a rhythm of warmth and vigilance threaded through generations, flickering like the fire that guided them through the cold. Their memories carried both worlds, stitched into the same quilt of survival. As you settle back into your imagined bed, the fur heavy across your chest and the fire pit glowing softly in the center of the room, you feel how survival transcends pride. It asks not for heritage, but for warmth. Families found it wherever wisdom showed the way. Indigenous knowledge became quiet armor, shaping nights that might otherwise have ended in silence. The warmth of borrowed furs lingers in your imagination, comforting yet fleeting. But not all nights ended with comfort. Even with quilts, snowbanks, and careful fire tending, families sometimes awoke to harsher realities: numb fingers, stiff toes, and the creeping dread of frostbite. The cold was a predator, gnawing at the edges of sleep, ready to steal sensation and sometimes life before dawn. Settlers' diaries and early doctors' journals make it plain that frostbite haunted frontier winters. Water buckets froze solid, hair stiffened with ice, and children awoke to swollen white hands. Unlike a sudden snowstorm, frostbite crept in silently through the night. One haunting story survives from a diary in upstate New York. A father discovered his son's ears frozen stiff after a night in the loft. While the body remained shielded, the ears lay exposed. The family rubbed snow against them, a treatment believed helpful, and prayed for recovery. They survived, though scars remained, lifelong reminders of winter's cruelty. Scholars still debate the frequency of frostbite. Some argue fatalities were rare thanks to layered defenses. Others suggest the silence of records masks the true toll, cases downplayed in letters out of shame or grief. The truth likely lies in between. Step into the sensory world of such fear. You lie beneath quilts, but cold creeps like an intruder over your feet. First a prickling numbness, then deep ache. You press your legs against a sibling's calves, desperate for warmth. Nose stings, ears burn, face buried in blankets. Sleep comes fitfully, haunted by the dread that hands or toes might awaken lifeless.
Settlers improvised remedies, rubbing goose grease or animal fat on frozen skin, or even wrapping fingers in onion pieces, hoping the pungent vapor would restore warmth. To us, eccentric; to them, essential. Scholars debate whether frostbite shaped sleeping arrangements more than comfort. Children often slept in the middle of the bed, sometimes affection, sometimes survival. The result was the same: tiny hands tucked safely, bodies pressed for warmth. Morning brought careful rituals, rubbing fingers, pressing toes, blowing warm breath over ears. Sharp pain often accompanied thawing, cries of relief and fear mingling. Scandinavian immigrants even carried embers in metal tins under beds, trading fire hazard for the promise of warmth. Better smoke than no fingers, wrote one Swedish settler. Frostbite left more than physical marks. Stiff hands, waxy skin, and the sting of thawing imprinted on memory, joining other dangers that left no visible scars. Respiratory illnesses lurked, persistent coughs, fevers, and the restlessness later known as cabin fever. Smoke from damp wood, animal odor, and condensation filled cabins. Children wheezed, adults' lungs burned. Pneumonia, bronchitis, influenza claimed lives, as chronicled by early physicians. One mother recalled children's hair frozen to log walls from condensed breath, pulled free gently, but the ensuing cough lingered all season.
The fragility of health made every night a gamble. Families improvised, hanging onions to absorb sickness, drinking hot toddies of water, whiskey, honey, and herbs. Scholars debate whether cabin fever was medical or psychological, but letters attest to restlessness, quarrels, and sudden weeping during endless storms. Children's imaginations became medicine. Siblings recounted summer fields, warm sunshine, and green leaves to a sick brother until he drifted into sleep. Even as illness stalked the night, families clung together. Each night became a small victory, surviving coughs, fevers, and frayed nerves. Yet before quilts could rise and fires smolder, other duties awaited. Sleep was never passive. Animals required attention. Livestock needed warmth, milk, meat, and draft animals to haul wood through snow. Evening chores were survival rituals. Men and boys hauled hay, broke ice, checked stalls. Women carried scraps to pigs, milked cows in steaming corners, and tucked chickens safely into coops. The frontier demanded constant vigilance, the rhythms of life shaped by cold, fire, and necessity. Each night, families moved through fatigue, illness, and fear, weaving a fragile pattern of survival. Each ember tended, every animal fed, every quilt tucked tight was part of a delicate dance against the unforgiving winter. A world where life was both precarious and tenacious, stitched together by courage, care, and the shared warmth of community. Only after these chores were done could families retreat indoors for the night. Sleep was earned through work, each animal fed, one less worry gnawing at a parent's mind. A Wisconsin settler once described pouring buckets of hot stones into the barn to raise the temperature. Wrapped in burlap, the stones glowed faintly in corners, giving livestock just enough warmth to survive. The smell, a strange mix of steaming hay and scorched cloth, was worth the effort, for the animals huddled closer and endured nights that might have killed them otherwise. Scholars debate how often such late-night barn visits occurred. Some argue chores stayed in daylight, while diaries tell of lanterns swaying through midnight snowdrifts, evidence that care never paused with the sun. Severity of winter dictated the rhythm. Mild nights allowed longer rest, harsher ones demanded constant vigilance. Imagine stepping outside into such a night. Wind roars, stealing your breath. Snowflakes sting your cheeks like needles, and the lantern flickers wildly, casting golden rings across the white expanse. Each step crunches, echoing in the silence, while your body shivers beneath layers of wool. Yet you trudge on, because animals wait, their survival entwined with your own. Inside the barn, warmth is relative. Hay,
manure, and the living breath of cows and horses mix with the glow of lantern light. Low rumbles, shifting hooves, and impatient snorts surround you. Stiff fingers reach to scatter feed, rub muzzles, whisper reassurance. Lantern shadows stretch across beams, and for a fleeting moment the barn feels sacred, not with prayer, but with ritual. Appalachian settlers often bedded animals with pine boughs, sharp, fragrant, insulating. Children dragged branches through snow, mittens sticky with sap. Settlers joked that animals slept better than their owners, but none doubted the necessity. Historians still debate how often such late-night barn visits occurred. Some argue chores stayed in daylight, while diaries tell of lanterns swaying through midnight snowdrifts, evidence that care never paused with the sun. Severity of winter dictated the rhythm. Mild nights allowed longer rest, harsher ones demanded constant vigilance. Imagine stepping outside into such a night. Wind roars, stealing your breath. Snowflakes sting your cheeks like needles, and the lantern flickers wildly, casting golden rings across the white expanse. Each step crunches, echoing in the silence, while your body shivers beneath layers of wool. Yet you trudge on, because animals wait, their survival entwined with your own. Inside the barn, warmth is relative. Hay, manure, and the living breath of cows and horses mix with the glow of lantern light. Low rumbles, shifting hooves, and impatient snorts surround you. Stiff fingers reach to scatter feed, rub muzzles, whisper reassurance. Lantern shadows stretch across beams, and for a fleeting moment the barn feels sacred, not with prayer, but with ritual. Appalachian settlers often bedded animals with pine boughs, sharp, fragrant, insulating. Children dragged branches through snow, mittens sticky with sap. Settlers joked that animals slept better than their owners, but none doubted the necessity. Historians still debate how often such late-night barn visits occurred. Some argue chores stayed in daylight, while diaries tell of lanterns swaying through midnight snowdrifts, evidence that care never paused with the sun. Severity of winter dictated the rhythm. Mild nights allowed longer rest, harsher ones demanded constant vigilance. Imagine stepping outside into such a night. Wind roars, stealing your breath. Snowflakes sting your cheeks like needles, and the lantern flickers wildly, casting golden rings across the white expanse. Each step crunches, echoing in the silence, while your body shivers beneath layers of wool. Yet you trudge on, because animals wait, their survival entwined with your own. Inside the barn, warmth is relative. Hay, manure, and the living breath of cows and horses mix with the glow of lantern light. Low rumbles, shifting hooves, and impatient snorts surround you. Stiff fingers reach to scatter feed, rub muzzles, whisper reassurance. Lantern shadows stretch across beams, and for a fleeting moment the barn feels sacred, not with prayer, but with ritual. Appalachian settlers often bedded animals with pine boughs, sharp, fragrant, insulating. Children dragged branches through snow, mittens sticky with sap. Settlers joked that animals slept better than their owners, but none doubted the necessity. Historians still debate how often such late-night barn visits occurred. Some argue chores stayed in daylight, while diaries tell of lanterns swaying through midnight snowdrifts, evidence that care never paused with the sun. Severity of winter dictated the rhythm. Mild nights allowed longer rest, harsher ones demanded constant vigilance. Imagine stepping outside into such a night. Wind roars, stealing your breath. Snowflakes sting your cheeks like needles, and the lantern flickers wildly, casting golden rings across the white expanse. Each step crunches, echoing in the silence, while your body shivers beneath layers of wool. Yet you trudge on, because animals wait, their survival entwined with your own. Inside the barn, warmth is relative. Hay, manure, and the living breath of cows and horses mix with the glow of lantern light. Low rumbles, shifting hooves, and impatient snorts surround you. Stiff fingers reach to scatter feed, rub muzzles, whisper reassurance.
Lantern shadows stretch across beams, and for a fleeting moment the barn feels sacred, not with prayer, but with ritual. Appalachian settlers often bedded animals with pine boughs, sharp, fragrant, insulating. Children dragged branches through snow, mittens sticky with sap. Settlers joked that animals slept better than their owners, but none doubted the necessity. Historians still debate how often such late-night barn visits occurred. Some argue chores stayed in daylight, while diaries tell of lanterns swaying through midnight snowdrifts, evidence that care never paused with the sun. Severity of winter dictated the rhythm. Mild nights allowed longer rest, harsher ones demanded constant vigilance. Imagine stepping outside into such a night. Wind roars, stealing your breath. Snowflakes sting your cheeks like needles, and the lantern flickers wildly, casting golden rings across the white expanse. Each step crunches, echoing in the silence, while your body shivers beneath layers of wool. Yet you trudge on, because animals wait, their survival entwined with your own. Inside the barn, warmth is relative. Hay, manure, and the living breath of cows and horses mix with the glow of lantern light. Low rumbles, shifting hooves, and impatient snorts surround you. Stiff fingers reach to scatter feed, rub muzzles, whisper reassurance. Lantern shadows stretch across beams, and for a fleeting moment the barn feels sacred, not with prayer, but with ritual. Appalachian settlers often bedded animals with pine boughs, sharp, fragrant, insulating. Children dragged branches through snow, mittens sticky with sap. Settlers joked that animals slept better than their owners, but none doubted the necessity. Historians still debate how often such late-night barn visits occurred. Some argue chores stayed in daylight, while diaries tell of lanterns swaying through midnight snowdrifts, evidence that care never paused with the sun. Severity of winter dictated the rhythm. Mild nights allowed longer rest, harsher ones demanded constant vigilance. Imagine stepping outside into such a night. Wind roars, stealing your breath. Snowflakes sting your cheeks like needles, and the lantern flickers wildly, casting golden rings across the white expanse. Each step crunches, echoing in the silence, while your body shivers beneath layers of wool. Yet you trudge on, because animals wait, their survival in...
Modern researchers debate whether frontier people suffered insomnia. Letters describe nights spent tossing and turning, minds that could not rest. Yet in a world where sleep was fragile, sleeplessness was less a condition than a way of life. The question is not how poorly they slept, but how they endured. Picture the texture of these restless hours, the cabin hushed, quilts heavy but offering no comfort, the mind replaying chores, fretting over dwindling firewood, a child's cough. Faint scratches of mice in the walls, the wind groaning like a warning, shadows teasing tired eyes. Sleep slips away, replaced by fatigue that thickens as night stretches. One child invented stories of sleep thieves, creatures that crept through cracks to steal rest. Siblings believed him so fiercely that groggy awakenings became battles of imagination rather than despair. Scholars debate whether fragmented nights shaped family bonds. Shared wakefulness may have created intimacy seldom experienced today. Exhaustion also bred quarrels. Sweet murmurs and bitter snapped words coexisted, just like the shifting winter weather. Imagine the dawn that follows such a night. Red-rimmed eyes, sluggish movement, complaints of aches. Parents stumble through chores, children protest. Life presses forward. Wood chopped, animals fed, fires tended. Rest is a luxury, deferred until spring. One woman remembered no specific winter mornings of rest, only the haze of weariness, but also the laughter bubbling in midnight hours, the way her father's whispered stories made shadows less frightening. Fatigue and comfort were braided strands of frontier memory. The night grants only fragmented sleep, but survival demanded it. Sounds magnify in darkness, mice scuttling through straw, wolves howling beyond walls, the groaning of settling logs. Small intrusions, a mouse on a child's face, rats nibbling food, became nightly companions, sometimes amusing, sometimes terrifying. Cats indoors served as guardians of sleep and warmth, chasing shadows while families whispered thanks. Wolves, coyotes, owls, and even bears shaped the winter soundscape. Some threats were real, others imagined, but fear amplified every creak and howl. Even surreal precautions emerge in letters. Scandinavian immigrants recorded clapping or tossing embers to ward off omen-carrying owls. Fathers stepped into the night waving burning sticks to hush a bird's cry so children could sleep. Nights were tense. Each creak, each wind gust reminded families of how thin the line between home and wilderness truly was. Inside, rafters popped, frost cracked, and intruders were imagined. A father leapt from bed with a musket, only to find a shifting log. Fear lingered, remembered decades later by children with both dread and humor. Families transformed fear into play. Popping rafters were old bones, scratching mice, little shoes, the wolf howl, the singing bog. Children laughed, whispered the names, and softened nightly disturbances. Scholars debate whether noise-filled nights shaped resilience, teaching vigilance, or merely eroded rest. Sound became a thread woven through the tapestry of winter survival. Dawn revealed groggy parents and children recounting nocturnal tales, laughter mingling with ordinary chores. Memories of night lingered, shaping stories told long after. Yet nature was not the only source of disturbance. Cabins were small, privacy nearly impossible. Families and visiting relatives slept within arm's reach. Every snore, shift, and whispered word carried across the space. Generations shared a single room. Grandparents near the fire, parents and infants in central beds, older children in lofts, guests wherever space remained. Dozens of bodies in one cabin yielded warmth, but individuality dissolved. Sleep was collective, a symphony of breathing, coughing, murmuring. A traveler in Kentucky described bedding with a frontier family during a snowstorm, identifying each member by nighttime sounds, the father's deep snores, mother's soft prayers, grandmother's wheezy cough, children's giggles before sleep. Strange to him, routine to them. Scholars debate whether this lack of privacy bred harmony or tension. Likely both. Laughter one night, quarrels the next. The household, alive even in sleep, moved as a single organism. Step into such a night. Wedged between siblings, elbows poking ribs, cold feet brushing yours. Straw rustles with every shift. Cousins snore above, grandmother mutters half-words, the air thick with sweat, wool, smoke. Privacy is fantasy, warmth real, and so you surrender to the crowded cocoon. Some households even designated a snorer's corner, banishing the loudest sleeper to the farthest pallet. Children joked about drawing straws, humorous attempts to impose order on chaos. Records hint modesty may have suppressed discussion, but silence was absent. Everyone accepted reality. Dawn after such a night is immediate and chaotic. A dozen sleepers stir, quilts tossed, voices overlapping, sneezes, coughs, cries for breakfast. Privacy remains a dream, but bonds of shared survival endure. Mischief softened monotony. One pioneered child confessed to kicking her brother awake, too cold to fight, finding humor in winter nights. These small acts, laughter entwined with exhaustion, became part of frontier resilience. Hardship shaped every corner of frontier nights. Researchers ponder how gender roles influenced sleeping arrangements. Did men and women separate by necessity, or did survival blur the lines?
Some accounts suggest modesty persisted with curtains or careful bed arrangements. Others argue that in deep winter, warmth overrode custom. Evidence is mixed, but the question underscores how survival reshaped cultural norms. Now imagine drifting into this symphony of night. Snores rumble, coughs punctuate, whispers float across the room. You shift, uncomfortable yet oddly comforted, knowing that every sound is proof of life. Closeness can feel suffocating, but it assures you are not alone. Each breath reminds you that survival is shared. One settler recalled, "Though we quarreled, though we groaned, I loved the sound of my family breathing beside me. Silence meant death, and so I was glad for the noise." Irritation and gratitude coexisted in equal measure. Rest was never purely comfort. It demanded vigilance. Danger was more than drafts or frostbite. Fires might leap from heaths. Raiders, thieves, or desperate travelers could appear at the door. Sleep carried a fragile tension. Firearms rested near beds, muskets leaning against walls, powder horns within reach. Isolation meant each cabin was a solitary fortress, ready to defend against animals, intruders, or the unpredictable wilderness. One Illinois settler recalled awakening to scratching at the door. His father leapt with musket in hand, only to find a neighbor's starving dog. "We dreamed with one ear open," he wrote, powder close at hand. Some historians debate whether frontier raids were exaggerated or real. The truth varied regionally. Some nights brought only restless animals, others genuine threats. Place yourself beneath the quilts. Fire dim, a shutter creak, heart racing. Every sound could be branch or stranger. The musket gleams faintly in the firelight. Uneasy sleep returns when silence stretches long.
Some German immigrant families used iron bars across doors, the scrape signaling safety. Nightly rituals like this became part of the lullaby of frontier nights. Communities sometimes shared vigilance, rotating watches, though isolation was common. Sensory details abound: faint gunpowder in the air, a dog shifting and growling, wind rattling shutters. The body longs for rest, the mind resists surrender. One quirky anecdote: a goose trained to honk at intruders. Better than a watchdog, joked the father, though once it woke them all. Children laughed, yet the goose ensured peace of mind. Constant vigilance may have frayed nerves or built resilience, shaping the psychology of nights. Dawn after vigilance is a moment of relief. The father yawns, smiling that the musket remained untouched. Children tumble from quilts, laughing at the goose's alarm. Breakfast tastes sweeter, strengthened by survival. One pioneer woman reflected, "We slept lightly, but we slept together. If danger came, we rose side by side." Sleep was tempered by danger, but unity persisted. The musket gleams, shutters strain against wind, and ears remain half awake. Yet frontier nights were also dream-filled. Exhausted bodies yielded visions remembered vividly. Letters speak of dreams that were messages, omens, divine or sinister, shaping behavior after dawn. A homesteader's wife dreamed of green wheat in January. Convinced spring would arrive early, the family planned planting accordingly. Though late, the dream lingered as talisman and story. Scholars debate whether dreams reflected religion or folk tradition, likely both interwove, sacred and superstitious coexisting. Imagine the dream-laden night, quilts heavy, fire dim, body aching. Suddenly you walk through a sunlit meadow, hear bees, smell fresh hay, feel grass beneath bare feet. Blissful minutes escape snow pressing on cabin walls. Then the cold air shocks you awake, the dream's contrast sharpening its memory. Immigrant households sometimes shared dreams aloud at breakfast, interpreting omens, laughing at flying pigs or rivers of honey. Children competed, parents sought patterns, grandparents murmured old sayings. Dreams became communal property, a bridge between fragmented rest and waking life. One widow dreamed of her late husband standing silently by the hearth. She awoke comforted, convinced of his presence. Dreams softened grief, transformed loss into a fleeting, sustaining presence.
Returning to your imagined bed, feel quilts pressing down, embers sighing faintly, family breathing around you. Drift into visions, fields of summer, animals prowling beyond reach, voices of loved ones. On the frontier, dreams were survival tools, temporary escapes where hope bloomed like spring in winter. Dawn has yet to arrive. The cabin is still, fire low, and cold presses in again. Hunger often accompanied sleep, another silent companion beneath the quilts. Full stomachs eased slumber, but scarcity meant drifting into dreams on broth or scraps, the memory of food as vital as sleep itself. Frontier nights were shaped as much by hunger as by cold. Farm journals and family letters speak often of rationing: cornmeal, dried beans, salted pork. By January, supplies ran thin. Families ate just enough to survive the day, then settled into bed with hunger gnawing at their bellies. Some parents sent children to sleep early, hoping slumber would muffle complaints. Others stretched meager meals with water or thin slices of bread. The hearth gave warmth, but food gave strength, and when both were scarce, nights felt endless. One Missouri settler recalled her mother slipping a hot potato into each child's hand before bed, doubling as a midnight snack if hunger stirred them awake. "We slept with supper in our palms and dreamed of feasts while we nibbled," she wrote. Small comforts carried children through harsh winters. Scholars debate the severity of winter hunger. Some argue households with foresight survived well. Others insist shortages were widespread. The reality varied from farm to farm. Imagine lying under quilts, stomach growling in the silence. Smoke teases memories of roasted meat, your mouth dry, limbs heavy. You press a potato closer, nibble it, feel warmth fade, but sleep creeps in anyway. Some families drank hot herb-infused water before bed, pretending it was stew. Researchers debate whether such meager diets weakened bodies or whether frontier metabolisms adapted. Either way, memory shaped the experience. Children recalling winters defined not just by cold, but by hollow bellies. Dawn brought stiff parents, thin porridge, and looming chores. Sleep offered only temporary escape. Hunger awaited morning. Some children dreamed of pies, their imagination filling the gap left by empty shelves. Shared hunger sometimes built resilience, sometimes bred resentment. Sensory details were vivid: the smell of simmering beans, the taste of salt clinging to pork fat, the sight of dwindling shelves. Dreams of feasts contrasted cruelly with reality, yet imagination carried the family through. Seasonal rhythms added structure. December nights, with pantries full and fresh straw in beds, were harsh but softened by preparation and optimism. By January, provisions dwindled, straw flattened, firewood piles shrank. February brought despair. Children marked winter's passage by the condition of their beds. Scholars debate how families measured seasonal shifts through moon phases, star positions, animal behavior, or the tactile sense of straw in quilts. Survival reshaped time itself. Imagine early winter. Firm straw, quilt smelling of fresh dye, pantry stocked. Midwinter, straw pricks, quilt smoke-stained, hunger nagging. Late winter, straw collapsed, quilts patched, fire low, food meager, sleep heavy with desperation. Some Appalachian families held a February feast, small though precious, breaking the monotony of scarcity and coaxing sweeter sleep. Researchers debate whether such adaptations hardened or wore down people. Letters reveal both despair and gratitude across years. Sensory differences between winter months were vivid. December brought pine-scented air, quick-warming quilts, whispered laughter. January, smoke-thick air, soot-heavy quilts, laughter fading. February, silence, exhaustion, hunger, wind dragging against shutters. One boy marked each February night with notches in his bedpost, counting down toward spring, a private calendar of survival. Spiritual calendars also provided structure: Christmas prayers, Epiphany hymns, Lenten fasts. Rituals layered meaning onto the cold, transforming endless winter into series of milestones. Step into a February night, fire barely glowing, pantry bare, and straw thin to dust. Quilts clutched close, whispering hope to yourself or your children that spring would come. One settler woman reflected, "We slept with hope in December, with patience in January, with endurance in February, with relief in March." Nights were measured less in days than in the emotional geography of survival. Families crafted unique traditions, practical, emotional, even celebratory, to endure the cold. Bedtime rituals bordered on ceremony, reading aloud from scraps of newspaper or tattered Bibles, ending evenings with hymns. One Ohio homestead had children place small sticks on the fire before bed, symbolizing shared labor and warmth. Scholars debate whether such rituals were widespread or limited to particularly imaginative families. Perhaps the truth lies in variation. Some stumbled into bed exhausted, others found strength in ritual.
Step into the sensory world of these traditions. The fire pops gently as each child adds a stick. A hymn echoes softly, voices cracked but steady. A father reads from a tattered book, words drifting over quilts like a second blanket. You feel warmth as the fire flares, smell pine resin, hear voices blending with the storm outside. Small acts, repeated nightly, made survival tangible, offering order and comfort amid winter's relentless cold. Outside, the ritual is small, almost imperceptible, yet in its repetition, it becomes sacred. Among German immigrant families, telling winter tales before bed was common. These stories blended folklore and family history, legends of spirits from the Black Forest, tales of grandparents braving ocean voyages. Children fell asleep feeling part of a long chain of survival, their own hardships linked to those of ancestors. The cold became less isolating when framed as a shared inheritance. Scholars debate whether such traditions softened memories of winter. Some argue rituals lent nostalgia, casting harsh nights in a warmer light. Others insist they were fragile shields, easily shattered by hunger or illness. Letters revealed both moods, warmth in some recollections, bitterness in others. Rituals could comfort, but they could not erase hardship. Imagine dawn following a night rich in ritual. Children wake humming songs, parents with prayers echoing in their minds. Even if hunger gnaws or frost presses at the door, the memory of ceremony lingers, shaping the day ahead. Some families counted winter nights in carved notches on bedposts, each cut a visible record of endurance. Rituals also took the form of games. Who could stand barefoot longest on the cabin floor? Who could blow out a candle in one breath? Laughter punctuated these contests, masking cold noses and empty bellies. Resilience often hid in humor. Step into these sensory worlds. Firelight flickers in children's eyes. Hymns drift upward, faint but steady. The scent of singed wood fills the air as a stick is laid on the flames. Outside, snow presses against the cabin, but inside, warmth grows from voices, stories, and small gestures. One woman who survived these winters wrote, "We did not only endure the cold, we marked it, sang through it, carved it into memory. That is how we slept through nights that might have broken us." Survival was as much about meaning as material. As you settled beneath imagined quilts, feel the rhythm of these small traditions. The stick in the fire, the softly hummed hymn, the carved notch in the wood. These fragile rituals carried families through winter, weaving comfort from repetition. And now, as the long winter slowly yields to spring, the truth emerges. Survival wasn't measured by warmth, by food, or by sturdy walls alone. It was measured by the fact that morning came and the family was still together. Every dawn a quiet triumph, proof that the night, with all its threats, had failed to break them. Vermont families sometimes celebrated the first night of thaw by sleeping with shutters wide open, braving the cold to breathe the promise of spring. Children laughed at the absurdity, but remembered it as the night winter finally lost its teeth. Experts debate how these frontier strategies shaped the American character. Resourcefulness, rituals, and ingenuity bred resilience, though survival often depended as much on luck. What remains clear is that these nights, harsh, repetitive, filled with fear and tenderness, became cultural memory,
teaching endurance, empathy, and shared strength. Step once more into the cabin. You lie beneath worn quilts, straws sagging beneath you, smoke thick in the air. A sibling breathes against your shoulder. A dog sighs near the hearth. The fire dwindles low. Outside, the wind prowls. Inside, life holds. You feel hunger, drafts, fatigue, but also family, shared rituals, and the comfort of survival. Sleep arrives not as an enemy, but a weary friend. One child confessed he wished winter nights would last longer, just to stay cocooned between siblings. Even in hardship, moments of sweetness lingered, reframing survival as intimacy as well as endurance. When dawn finally breaks after the coldest night, relief sparkles. Frost glints on the window. The fire smolders but endures. Parents stretch stiff limbs. Children blink awake. Animals stir. Another night survived. The thread of life kept unbroken. Let the story soften. Let the fire dim. The wind eases into a whisper. The cabin grows quiet, not from despair, but from rest. The night recedes, leaving memory of closeness, survival, and warmth carved from scarcity. As our journey through frontier nights ends, slow your breathing. Let cabins, quilts, straw beds, and snowdrifts fade gently. The struggle was real, cold biting to the bone, hunger gnawing, noises haunting. Yet despite it all, survival prevailed, a quiet triumph. Picture the hush after a storm when snow settles silently. The cabin is still. The family is asleep. Only the fire crackles softly. Feel warmth from shared quilts, the straw beneath you, the rhythm of breathing around you. These images belong not just to history, but now to you as comfort. Hardships are behind you. The night no longer threatens. You're safe, wrapped in memory and imagination, just as frontier families were wrapped in wool and fur. Let your eyelids grow heavier. Let the wind soften into a distant hum. Let each breath carry you deeper until details blur, leaving only calm. The long winter has passed, and you have endured. Morning will come, as it always did, carrying light and warmth. For now, surrender. Close your eyes. Drift gently into sleep. Sweet dreams.